She stood up at the head of that conference table, looked me dead in the eye, and said I was the kind of woman who coasted on her husband's connections. She said it in front of 40 people. She said it like she was proud. And the worst part was that my husband was sitting 3 chairs away from me and he said absolutely nothing. Not one word. That was the moment I stopped being the woman who covered for him, waited for him, and forgave him. That was the moment I opened my laptop instead. Before I tell you what was in that file, I need you to answer one question for yourself. If the person who was supposed to love you most handed your biggest dream to someone else, and then sat there and watched that person humiliate you because of it, what would you do? Would you cry? Would you explode? Or would you get very, very quiet and very, very prepared? Tell me in the comments. Because Mia got quiet. And quiet turned out to be the most dangerous thing in that room. She stood up at the head of that conference table, looked me dead in the eye, and said I was the kind of woman who coasted on her husband's connections. She said it in front of 40 people. She said it like she was proud. And the worst part was that my husband was sitting 3 chairs away from me and he said absolutely nothing. Not one word. That was the moment I stopped being the woman who covered for him, waited for him, and forgave him. That was the moment I opened my laptop instead. My name is Mia, and I am going to tell you exactly what happened, exactly what I found, and exactly what I did about it. I am not going to rush through this because you need to understand how long it was building before you can understand how powerful it felt when it finally fell apart for the people who deserved it. I met Daniel when I was 26. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming when they want something from you. Not over the top, not desperate, just attentive. He remembered small things. He showed up when he said he would. He laughed at the right moments and listened at the right moments, and I was young enough to confuse that with depth. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, and got married in a small ceremony on a Saturday in October. My mother cried. His mother looked at my dress like it was a missed opportunity for something more expensive. I should have paid more attention to that look. I worked in communications, not in a small way. I had spent 8 years building a reputation in corporate communications consulting. I ran crisis accounts. I had pulled 3 companies out of public disasters that would have ended them. I was good at my job the way some people are good at reading weather. I felt it before other people saw it. I knew when a story was about to turn, when a client needed to change direction before the press caught up, when silence was more powerful than a press release. My client list was strong. My name was respected. When Daniel and I got married, we made a decision together. He had an opportunity at a mid-sized financial services firm called Greystone Capital. The managing director knew his family. It was not a groundbreaking position, but it had a clear path upward, and Daniel was ambitious in the way that looks very attractive when you are in love, and looks very different a few years later. We agreed I would slow down on solo consulting and we would build something together. I joined Greystone as their head of communications and brand strategy. I built their entire external messaging from the ground up, their press relationships, their crisis protocol, their executive communications. I did it because I believed in us as a team and because Daniel told me we were exactly that. Lauren started at Greystone about 14 months after me. She was 24. She came in as an executive assistant, technically reporting to the VP of Operations but floating support across several senior staff, including Daniel. I noticed her immediately, not because anything alarmed me, but because she was the kind of person who notices everything in a room. She watched how people moved. She remembered who had power. She was smart about it. At the time, I found it admirable. I thought she was just a driven young woman learning the landscape. I even told Daniel she seemed sharp and that we should look for a way to develop her. I want you to hold that sentence in your mind. I said that. I told my husband that Lauren seemed sharp and that we should help her grow. I said it over dinner one night like I was doing something good. I was. I believed in giving people room. I just did not know at that point that the room I was opening was being used to replace me. The first sign was small enough that I nearly walked right past it. It was a Tuesday evening around 7, and I had stayed late finishing a media strategy document for the firm's first major acquisition announcement. It was a document I had been building for 3 weeks. 40 pages of coordinate. Ed messaging, timing, stakeholder communication, press sequencing. It was some of the best work I had done. I saved it to the shared server under my name and went home. 2 days later, I found it again on the same server but renamed. The author name had been changed in the document properties to Lauren Marsh. My name was gone. The creation date had been adjusted. The writing was mined down to the sentence rhythm, the specific turn of phrase I always used when introducing a staged disclosure plan, the footnote structure I had used for years. But the name on that document said Lauren Marsh. I stared at that screen for a long time. I did not say anything. Not yet. I am not someone who moves fast on half a picture. I took a screenshot of both versions. I sent the original to my personal email with the original metadata attached. Then I kept watching. I want to be clear about something. At this point in the story, I had no proof of anything between Daniel and Lauren. I had a renamed document. I had a suspicious pattern. I had a feeling I kept trying to reason away. I told myself there was an explanation, an admin error, a server glitch. Maybe Lauren had been asked to update it and changed the properties by mistake. I gave that story to myself for about 3 weeks before the next thing happened. Daniel started working later. I did not notice at first because we had always both worked long hours. But then it became consistent. Mondays and Thursdays, he was not home until 9 or 9:30. He told me the acquisition was in a sensitive phase and leadership needed more time in the evenings. That was plausible. It was a major deal. I did not push. Then one morning I was looking for the insurance card in the glove compartment of his car, and I found a receipt from a restaurant called Olio. It was a nice restaurant, not a client dinner place, not a conference room dinner order, a corner table, low-light, good wine kind of restaurant. The receipt was for 2 people. Dinner on a Thursday, 8 weeks earlier. Daniel had told me he had a working dinner with the CFO that Thursday. The CFO's name was not on the receipt, just the date. Just the amount, just the quiet evidence that something was not what he had said. I did not cry when I found it. I took a photo of the receipt, put it back exactly where I found it, and went inside to make coffee. My hands were steady. My mind was not. But I had learned something about myself over the years of crisis communications work. When everything is on fire, the worst thing you can do is let the other side see you sweat. So I made my coffee. I smiled at Daniel when he came into the kitchen, and I started keeping notes. The notes became a system. I started tracking patterns. Dates Daniel came home late. Dates I had seen Lauren stay past hours on the office floor. Meetings that appeared on the shared calendar as internal strategy sessions but had no one else listed as attendees. A pattern began to form over about 6 weeks of watching, and that pattern pointed in one direction. At the same time, something was shifting at work that I could not quite name yet. I was still running communications. I was still attending the senior leadership meetings. But slowly, incrementally, I started being left off certain email chains. Not every chain, just some. Specifically the ones involving the acquisition announcement strategy, which was the exact work I had spent months building. When I asked Daniel about it, he said it was just a restructuring of information flow to keep the process clean. He said it like it was nothing. I accepted that for longer than I should have because I trusted him, and because accepting it was easier than what the alternative would mean. Then came the promotion announcement. Greystone had created a new executive role, Vice President of Strategic Communications. It was a role that had my fingerprints all over the job description because I had literally written the framework for what that function should look like 2 years earlier in a proposal to the managing director. I had written that proposal. I had presented it. I had laid out the scope, the reporting structure, the key deliverables. My proposal had been the basis for creating the role. Everyone knew that. Or so I thought. I found out about the promotion the same way everyone else found out. An internal announcement email at 11 in the morning on a Wednesday. Congratulations to Lauren Marsh on her appointment as Vice President of Strategic Communications. The announcement listed her accomplishments. The acquisition media strategy was listed among them. The one with my name removed and hers put in. I read that email twice. The second time my hands started to shake a little, not from sadness, from recognition. Because all of the small things I had been cataloging had just connected into one clear picture. Daniel had not told me. He had not given me any warning. He had not said a single word over any of our dinners, any of our evenings, any of our mornings together in the last several months while this was all being assembled around me. I had been cut out of my own work, erased from my own documents, and then replaced by a woman I had once defended to my husband, and he had sat next to me every night and said nothing. I went to his office that afternoon. I closed the door. I asked him directly why he had not told me. He said the decision had been made at the board level and it was not his choice to share in advance. He said Lauren had proven herself and the role needed fresh energy. Fresh energy. Those were his words, to me, about work I had built with my own hands. I asked him if he had recommended her. He said the managing director had made the call. He did not answer my actual question. I noticed that. I left his office without raising my voice. I went back to my desk. I opened a new folder on my personal laptop and I called it Evidence. Over the next 2 weeks, I was methodical. I had access to shared drives that most people had forgotten I had. I had been the architect of the communications infrastructure, which meant I had administrative credentials that predated Lauren's arrival and had never been revoked. I was not breaking any rules by accessing what I already had legal and professional access to, but I started looking with different eyes. What I found over those 2 weeks was significant. There were emails, not romantic emails, something almost worse in a professional sense. There were emails in which Daniel had forwarded my strategy documents to Lauren before they were shared with the broader team and asked her to study them and present them as her own thinking at upcoming meetings. There were emails in which Daniel had coached Lauren on what to say in her reviews, had given her my performance data to reference when arguing her case to leadership, and had specifically asked the managing director to consider her for the VP role in a private recommendation letter that had bypassed the normal process. The letter described Lauren as the creative force behind the communications department's best work over the past year. That was my work. Every word of it was my work. I copied everything, every email, every forwarded document, every coaching note. I saved it in encrypted folders on a personal drive. I kept that drive at my sister's house. I did not tell anyone what I was doing, not yet, because I was not done. And because the thing about quiet evidence is that it only works when you release it at exactly the right moment. Around this time, something else happened that I had not expected. My colleague James, who ran financial analysis and had been at Greystone longer than almost anyone, came to find me one morning. He closed my office door behind him, which he had never done before, and he said he needed to tell me something he had been sitting on for too long. He said he had been in a meeting 2 months earlier where Daniel had explicitly told the managing director that I had been considering leaving Greystone to return to solo consulting, and that the company should plan for my departure. He had framed it as a heads-up, a professional courtesy, but James said it had not felt like that in the room. It had felt like Daniel was building a case for why I was already on my way out, so that replacing me would not look like betrayal. It would look like forward planning. I sat very still while James told me that. When he was done, I thanked him. I told him I was not going anywhere. I asked if he would be willing to put what he witnessed in writing. He hesitated for just a moment, and then he said yes. That yes was the first external wall of my evidence structure. I told him to write it as a factual account of what was said in that meeting, nothing more, nothing inflammatory, just what he heard. He sent it to me that afternoon. I saved it with everything else. Now I had something. I had document theft with metadata proof. I had a pattern of email coaching and strategy forwarding. I had a private recommendation letter that bypassed process. I had a witness statement from a credible colleague. I had dinner receipts, late evenings, and a husband who had looked me in the eye every day for months while this was happening and said nothing. I want to be honest about where I was emotionally at this point. I was not okay. I went through a week where I cried every night after Daniel went to sleep. I cried in my car in the parking garage for about 10 minutes on a Thursday morning before pulling myself together and going inside. I was grieving something that had not fully ended yet, which is one of the loneliest kinds of grief there is, because I still had to sit across from him at dinner. I still had to answer his questions about my day. I still had to act like I did not know what I knew, but I kept going, because there was something else I needed. The pattern I had been building needed one more piece. I needed to know if this was purely PR, professional, or if the professional betrayal was connected to something personal. Not because I needed the emotional confirmation at that point. I think I already knew, but because when the moment came to act, I needed my position to be so clean and so complete that there was no version of events anyone could offer that would muddy it. I got that confirmation not through dramatic detective work, but through the most ordinary kind of accident. Daniel's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter on a Sunday morning while he was in the shower. I was not looking for it. I was not hovering over his phone waiting for a sign. I was making eggs and his phone was just there and a message preview appeared and it was from Lauren and it said 3 words that were enough. It said miss you already. I put the spatula down. I turned off the burner. I took a photograph of the preview. I turned the burner back on and I finished the eggs. That was the last piece. I had everything I needed. Now it was only a matter of timing. The opportunity came faster than I expected and from a direction I had not fully planned for. Greystone held its annual communications and strategy summit the following month. It was an all-hands event with all 40-plus staff, the managing director, the board members who flew in from out of town, and several client representatives. It was a significant day. Presentations from each strategic department. I had prepared mine with my usual level of care. What I had not expected was what Lauren would do with hers. Lauren's presentation came in the early afternoon. I watched it from my seat near the back of the conference room. The presentation was strong. It was polished. It covered the acquisition communications strategy in a way that was genuinely impressive to anyone who did not know where every idea, every framework, every turn of phrase in that strategy had originated. Lauren was a good presenter. She had confidence. She held the room. And she had been very, very well prepared by someone who knew exactly what to give her. What I had not prepared for was the direct attack. Midway through her presentation, Lauren paused, looked directly at me across the room, and said that the communications department had been held back for years by people who built their positions on personal relationships rather than professional merit. She did not say my name. She did not have to. Every person in that room knew who she was talking about. She said it with a smile. She said it with the ease of someone who believed she was untouchable. And then she said that the new direction under her leadership would be built on actual results, not on who you were married to. The room got very quiet. Some people looked at their laptops. A few looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the table, not at me, at the table. And that was the moment I stopped waiting. I did not stand up immediately. I let a beat pass. I let the silence sit for just long enough that everyone in that room had fully absorbed what she had said. Then I raised my hand and asked if I could respond with a brief addendum since my work had been referenced. The managing director, to his credit and perhaps because he was already uncomfortable, said yes. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the presentation I had prepared, but I also pulled up the folder I had been building for 8 weeks. I connected to the display screen. I said with complete calm that I wanted to make sure the room had accurate information about the origins of the work that had just been presented. I showed them the original acquisition strategy document with the original metadata. Creation date, author name, time stamps, my name, my date. Then I showed them the renamed version with Lauren's name. Same document, different name. The metadata side by side was irrefutable. Then I showed them the emails. Not all of them. I had selected 4, the 4 that were the clearest. The one where Daniel forwarded my work to Lauren with a note saying study this and make it yours. The one where he coached her on what to say in her review. The one where he sent her my performance metrics and told her to use them in her own case for promotion. And the private recommendation letter to the managing director that described her as the creative force behind the department, a letter he had never shown me or disclosed as part of any formal process. I did not narrate them heavily. I just displayed them. I said that I wanted the room to have complete information before any further characterizations of my career were made. Then I sat down. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. You can feel it pressing on the people in the room. I watched the managing director's face. I watched the board members who had flown in from out of town. I watched Lauren. She had stopped smiling. Her jaw had tightened and her eyes had moved to Daniel, and Daniel was not looking at her or at the managing director or at me. He was looking at nothing. One of tea. Board members asked to pause the summit for a break. They called an immediate closed session. I was asked to join. Lauren was not. In that closed session, I presented everything calmly. I had printed copies in a folder. I was not emotional in the room. I had done my crying at home. In that room, I was precise, factual, and professional. I answered questions. I provided dates. I handed over my printed copies. I provided James's written statement. I made clear that I was not there to destroy anyone. I was there because my professional integrity had been publicly attacked using work that had been taken from me, and the record needed to be correct. The managing director, whose name was Gerald, and who had always struck me as someone who hated being caught in anything messy, looked like a man who was doing rapid calculations. I could see him weighing the board members in the room against the exposure the firm now faced. This was not just a workplace conflict. This was documented evidence of a senior employee systematically crediting another person's work to a third party for what appeared to be personal reasons. That was a liability. I left that meeting at 4 in the afternoon. I drove home. I sat in my driveway for about 20 minutes. Then I went inside and I made dinner because I did not know what else to do with my hands. Daniel came home at 7. He was quiet. He did not apologize. He asked what I was planning to do. I told him I was planning to protect myself. He said he could explain everything. I told him I had read his explanations already, and I found them less convincing in writing than I thought he would. He started to say something about Lauren being under a lot of pressure and the promotion being a strategic decision that had nothing to do with us. I stopped him there. I told him I was done with the version of the story where his choices were something that happened to me from the outside. I told him I needed him to find somewhere else to sleep that night. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he went to the guest room. I want to tell you what happened at Greystone over the next 2 weeks because it is important to understand that real consequences are not dramatic explosions. They are slow and procedural, and they have a weight that feels more permanent than any confrontation. Lauren was placed on administrative leave within 4 days of the summit. The firm retained an outside HR consultant to review the documents I had provided. Daniel was asked to step back from his senior advisory role on the acquisition while the review was underway. He was not fired immediately because the firm was in the middle of a deal, and they were terrified of further disruption. But he was effectively sidelined. His access to certain communications was restricted. His name was removed from external-facing documents for the acquisition announcement. The managing director called me into a private meeting and apologized. It was not a full apology. It was the kind of apology that a person gives when they know they missed something and they are trying to limit how bad it looks. He acknowledged that the process for the VP appointment had not followed proper procedure. He acknowledged that the work attributed to Lauren in the announcement had originated with me. He offered me a formal correction and asked what I needed from the firm going forward. I told him I needed 3 things. I needed a written acknowledgement of the record. I needed my documentation formally entered into the firm's official archive. And I needed my contract reviewed and renegotiated with appropriate protections in place. He agreed to all 3. I had brought my own attorney to that meeting. She sat next to me and said very little, and her presence alone communicated everything that needed to be communicated about how serious I was. Lauren's administrative leave turned into a resignation 4 weeks later. I never had a conversation with her directly. I did not need one. The documents had said everything I needed to say, and they had said it with a precision that no conversation could match. Daniel and I had 3 conversations over the following weeks that I think are important to describe honestly. The first was practical. We talked about the house, the finances, what separation would look like. He was cooperative in a way that felt like relief, like a man who had been waiting for the thing to finally break so he could stop pretending it had not. The second conversation was him telling me he was sorry. I listened. I did not perform forgiveness I did not feel. I said I heard him and that I hoped he understood the full scope of what he had done, not just to me but to my career, my reputation, and my belief in the thing I thought we were building together. He cried a little. I did not. The third conversation was with our lawyers present, and it was the cleanest of the 3. My sister came and stayed with me for 2 weeks. She helped me pack the guest room. After Daniel moved to his brother's apartment, she did not ask me too many questions. She cooked a lot. She let me be quiet when I needed to be quiet, and she kept me company when the quiet got too heavy. I am not sure people talk enough about what it means to have someone just sit in the room with you when everything is changing. It matters more than any advice anyone could give. My mother called when she heard. She said she had never fully trusted Daniel and she had always wanted to say so. I told her I wished she had. She said she had not wanted to interfere. We had a long conversation that was overdue by several years, and it ended with me feeling closer to her than I had in a long time. At work, I did something that surprised even me. I did not coast on the vindication. I did not come in with the energy of someone who had won something. I came in and I worked. I finished the acquisition communications rollout, which was now mine in name as well as in original authorship. I ran the press sequencing. I managed the media contacts. The acquisition announcement went exactly as I had planned it. The press coverage was clean and strong. The managing director sent me a note afterward that said it was the most professionally executed communications event the firm had seen. About 6 weeks after the summit, James came to my office again. This time he knocked and waited. He came in and sat down and said he wanted to tell me something without any agenda. He said he had been at Greystone for 11 years and he had watched a lot of people come and go, and he had never seen anyone handle what I had handled with the combination of preparation and composure that I had shown. He said it mattered to people on the floor, that people had noticed, that there was a quiet respect in the building for what I had done and how I had done it. I thanked him, and then I asked him if he wanted to join me for a working lunch because I had ideas about a financial communications initiative that I thought his department should be part of. He laughed. We went to lunch. We built something good together in the months that followed. I want to tell you about a moment that I have thought about many times since everything happened. It was about 3 months after the summit. I was having coffee alone at a table near the window in a small place near my apartment. I had started renting my own apartment. It was smaller than the house. It smelled like fresh paint and new wood floors, and it was entirely mine. I was sitting at that table with my coffee and my notebook, and I was not thinking about Daniel or Lauren or the firm or any of it. I was thinking about a new project I wanted to pitch. I was sketching out the framework. And I realized with a clarity that felt almost physical that I was not angry anymore. I had expected the anger to stay longer. I had expected it to follow me around like a shadow for years. But sitting there in that small coffee place with my notebook and my coffee, I found that what I felt was something much quieter. Not happiness, not yet, not all the way, but relief. And beneath the relief, something solid, something that felt like myself. Like I had retrieved a version of me that had been buried under years of adjusting, accommodating, waiting, excusing, and shrinking myself to fit into a life that was not built around what I actually was. The Mia who had renamed her documents and coached someone else to claim her work, and then sat at a dinner table every night while his wife did not know any of it. That version of my life was over. Not because of the confrontation. Not because of the documents or the boardroom or the attorney at my elbow. Because of the night I made eggs after seeing those 3 words on Daniel's phone screen and decided that I was done operating out of fear. I was done staying small to keep someone else comfortable. I was done. There is one more thing I want to tell you, and it happened 8 months after the summit at a professional networking event I almost did not go to. I was there on behalf of the firm. I was standing near the drinks table, talking to a woman from another communications firm who had reached out to me after reading about the acquisition rollout in a trade publication. She was describing a challenge her team was facing, and I was listening and already starting to see the shape of a solution, and I realized that I was good at this. Not in a proud way, just in a plain and clear way. I was genuinely, substantially good at what I did. And I had almost let someone else convince me I was not. That is the thing I most want you to hold on to from this story. Not the documents, not the boardroom, not the quiet devastation of watching those emails get displayed on the screen in front of 40 people. What I most want you to hold on to is this: the people who try to diminish you are usually most afraid of exactly the thing you are best at. They rename the documents because the documents are too good. They sideline you because your presence makes the game harder to run. They build their case on your work because their own case is not strong enough to stand on. Mia did not win because she got angry. Mia did not win because she gave a speech or made a scene or broke down in front of everyone and asked to be believed. Mia won because she paid attention, because she kept records, because she moved slowly and correctly while everything around her was moving fast and carelessly. And because she had finally, completely stopped being afraid of what the truth would cost her. It cost her a marriage. It cost her a house. It cost her a version of her future she had believed in. That is not a small cost. I will not tell you it was easy or that the math came out perfectly even in some satisfying way. Loss is loss, even when the thing you lost was already broken. But on the other side of that cost was something real, something she had not had in years: herself. And that, in the end, turned out to be worth more than any of it.